I think we can all safely say, whether we like it ourselves or not, that Jujutsu Kaisen is one of the most popular anime titles around right now. And with the arrival of Season 2 and the series' massively important Shibuya incident arc, that popularity has only skyrocketed. Jujutsu Kaisen follows the story of Satoru Gojo as Yuji Itadori, a semi-ordinary high school boy who finds himself inducted into the world of supernatural powers, curses, and sorcerers. Now, while Yuji may have superhuman physical prowess that renders him capable of shattering Olympic records with ease, he doesn't possess any supernatural powers of his own. So when his occult club friends unwittingly unseal a fragment of the legendary evil sorcerer Sukuna, he has no effective way of fighting off the curses that swarm to the source of power. Then, after learning from a young sorcerer named Megumi Fushiguro that the curses want the piece of Sukuna to make themselves more powerful, Yuji cooks up the harebrained scheme of eating the finger himself, hoping it might give him the power he needs to save the day, resulting in the reincarnation of the greatest evil the world has ever known, the King of Curses himself. Unfortunately for Sukuna, Yuji can suppress him, meaning that he can't run rampant like he would wish to. Unfortunately for Yuji, his actions are considered taboo, and that puts him on the chopping block as the leaders of the Jujutsu world would want him executed. However, thanks to the intervention of the main character Satoru Gojo, Yuji's execution is postponed until they're able to gather all the fragments of Sukuna and destroy him entirely. Being already condemned to die, Yuji accepts his fate and becomes a sorcerer himself in order to pursue his goal of saving as many people as possible before the end. Now, story-wise, there's quite a bit of skill in the way it's written if you ponder it on mechanics alone. Powers, at their core, are usually very simple, and that can make them fairly easy to understand at times, and even cooler when they're implemented in ways that you might not have seen coming. The power system as well is something I like, but I'll get to that in a bit. And narratively speaking, it's really good, even if it still does have some of those stereotypical shonen features to it. For example, the story's main theme is about the relationship between solitude and power, with Sukuna representing the pinnacle of power that one can only achieve by shunning human connection and becoming self-sufficient. Meanwhile, Yuji represents the idea that people only reach their peak potential when they have complementary elements in the form of companions to work alongside. In essence, it's kind of a fancy way of saying that this is about the power of friendship. On the mechanics side of it, there's a lot of world building that goes into it. And the story features my favorite kind of manipulative, one-step-ahead type of villains in the form of this guy. But more to the point, it does a lot of good building that makes everything fit together nicely in the narrative. Characters are well structured, have their own charms, and are also used very well within the story. In fact, I think there's hardly a character in this series that I didn't like or didn't think was handled well. I say hardly because the Kyoto students are kind of a mixed bag. But villains and main cast alike are all excellent. I mean, it's hard not to absolutely love the omnipotent clown that is Satoru Gojo. Kento Nanami, Maki Zenin, and Yuta Okotsu are all just straight up badasses, and it's really hard not to see how cool they are. Aoi Todo is a ridiculously fun character, and you get the point. The cast is largely made up of characters who you can actually like. And since they all have their own unique quirks, they tend to be very outstanding even in a world where having a few screws loose is the norm. But good characters are nothing without good payoff. If all it resulted in was being another flashy shonen, the series wouldn't be all that spectacular. Season 1 of Jujutsu Kaisen is a great way to start off. It throws you right into the world of Jujutsu and shows you the brutal nature of the jobs sorcerers take on. And that right there is one thing this series does to distinguish itself from a lot of other shonens. It takes on a much darker tone, portraying the world in full color for you at times that most shonens would gloss over. Among other things, Season 1 also sort of introduces you to how the whole story is going to go, as well as how hype the action sequences can be, but we'll get to that point later. Jujutsu Kaisen does a great job of trading away the ideal for the real, and every battle has consequences in the story. Win or lose, nothing is the same every time the dust settles. And the fact that Jujutsu Kaisen is willing to embrace so many of these trade-off victories makes it truly remarkable. It gives a real sense of stakes and consequences to this world, which most shonens only manage to secure by consistently ratcheting up the stakes of the battles or by drawing out tension unnecessarily to give you the illusion of loss. Jujutsu Kaisen actually deals with consequences. People die in this series. A lot of people. And ones you would think would have plot armor in any normal shonen. It isn't afraid to maim or murder your favorite characters. Nothing is sacred, nobody is invincible, and nobody makes it out unscathed or unchanged. Season 1 has some of this element to it. You see people hospitalized, and in some cases people are killed in some dramatic ways. But that's nothing but a taste, and a way of easing you into the idea that this series doesn't do plot armor. Nothing in this series so far compares to the soul-crushing power of the Shibuya arc, a masterclass in how to traumatize your fanbase. Seriously, this is one of the more gloriously brutal bits of storytelling you can find in shonen, and it pretty much captures the essence of the whole series. All those characters you know and love, you'll watch them struggle, suffer, and die without exception. The best way to describe the Shibuya arc is just suffering. So up to this point, the first 2 seasons have shown Gege's skill in writing and just how thorough the story is considered. It's intricate and thrilling, not just for the action sequences and the powerhouse matchups, but for the execution on character development, world building, and storytelling. Unfortunately, as much as I did love it, I have to say that it doesn't have the same emotional hook as a lot of my favorite shows. As much as I liked every character in this story, as cool as I thought Satoru Gojo and all the others were, I never really felt a connection to them the way I felt a connection to characters like Kakashi Hatake or Guts from Berserk. Most of the characters in Jujutsu Kaisen only ever got me to care about them on a surface level. It wasn't like I couldn't empathize with the struggles or burdens they carried. It wasn't that I thought it was all over dramatized. It wasn't even that I didn't feel moved by the tragedy and all. It was simply that none of them ever really struck a chord with me. I'm finding it's a hard thing for me to explain, which probably means it's completely irrational. But it just felt to me like I lacked a real connection with the characters and the story up to this point. And that brings us back to the last writing aspect of the series that I really need to cover. The power system. In terms of writing, a well-defined power system that carries nuance and detailed mechanics of how things work has 2 advantages. One, that it makes combat involve more strategy and mental skill in order to overcome opponents, without retconning things. And that it helps keep power creep in check. The more rules and specifics that define a power system, the less likely you are to completely blow the top off of it just by progressing the story. And I think Jujutsu Kaisen did an excellent job with that. There's nothing too revolutionary about the basics. Negative human emotion generates negative cursed energy. Places that result in a lot of resentment and negativity become wellsprings that breed cursed spirits, and those spirits are related to the fears that create them, like Jogo being a spirit representing the fear of volcanoes. It's simple so far, and nothing really spectacular, but it starts to get kind of convoluted once you realize there's a difference between reverse curse technique, which is used to convert negative energy into positive energy, and curse technique reversal, which is the use of positive energy in cursed techniques to produce the opposite effect. An example of the latter here comes from Satoru Gojo's Limitless technique. Gojo's base ability is the power to create infinite convergence, meaning that when an object approaches him, it gets infinitely slower and never actually reaches him. A really awesome power too, if you ask me. By reversing this technique, it produces infinite divergence. Then, add on to that the idea of innate abilities like Six Eyes, the concept of pacts and binding vows, and so on. Things start to have a lot of rules that you need to follow. And you can see why I would call this a bit convoluted. But then we get to the real showstopper move, the domain expansion. And there's a bit of explaining for this one too. According to the wiki, the concept is defined as the construction of the user's innate domain within a barrier imbued with a cursed technique. Basically, the innate domain is the depiction of a person's mentality and personality. Their inner world, so to speak. And the domain expansion casts that inner world out over the physical world. This gives the caster environmental buffs as well as assurance that their cursed technique will always land within the domain. So what the hell does all of that gobbledygook even mean? Well, it really means that deploying a domain is serious business, and it hits with the kind of hype level you would expect an ultimate technique to have. When a character in this series uses a domain expansion, things always go crazy. And I mean, the concept is just cool too. And you really get that tingle down your spine during those scenes where a character utters the word domain expansion. Again, I won't go and say that Jujutsu Kaisen is the most incredible power system ever devised, but I do think it's a good one. I still think Nen is my favorite by far, simply because it shows more creativity and fun with the way it's used. But this whole system of power fits into the world, and with the idea that Gege has been putting a lot of thought into the way he writes and how he uses the elements in his series, which I damn well respect. And with all of that said, there is one aspect of this series that I would be remiss not to touch on. One that takes this series from a good show to a great show. Animation. This is really the aspect that sends this series to the stratosphere, if you ask me. And one that seems to be the main driver behind the anime's massive popularity and hype. Jujutsu Kaisen has an incredible animation game, with combat scenes being intense, hype as hell, and really well animated and choreographed. They feel alive and full of energy, and reach an intensity a lot of other shows don't seem to approach. On top of the fact that this series just doesn't do plot armor, it really embraces the idea of a battle manga. From small things like Yuji fighting a grasshopper curse to powerhouse confrontations like Sukuna vs. Mahoraga, the series is full of epic battles that are sure to make it worth your time. Of course, the animation would be hollow splendor without a solid basis in the form of story and characters you can actually enjoy. So all that said, is Jujutsu Kaisen an absolute shonen masterpiece? Honestly, I still say no. Calling it peak fiction would be an absolute lie, especially when you have to contend with certain things like Berserk or Attack on Titan. But to say that this series is nothing more than overhyped mid is also an absolute bold-faced lie. It's a genuinely fantastic show, one I find a great deal of entertainment in. I like the characters and the concept. It's spectacular on the visual appeal department and holds up really, really well narratively. The idea of deeper meaning and emotional connection aren't a huge issue if you look at this from a purely entertainment perspective and acknowledge that not everything is going to be deep and meaningful. Sometimes you're allowed to just enjoy the battle anime for being a battle anime. So I give Jujutsu Kaisen a 9 out of 10. It's great, but not perfect. It's wildly thrilling and easily worth a watch if you like battle anime. Plus, Where Our Blue Is and specials are some absolutely awesome intros that I couldn't get out of my head for the longest time. And if not for Frieren coming out in the same year, this show would have been my #1 anime for 2023. It deserves the popularity it's garnered, and yes, even the thirsty female fans drooling over the DILF squad.
What now?
But that's enough said. If you liked this video, please consider liking and subscribing because those simple but free actions do really help me. And if you have thoughts of your own, please share them down in the comments. I hope to see you in the next one. Later.